Did you know that the average car emits approximately 4.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide per year? Now imagine the impact of millions of these vehicles on our environment. Biden isn't just calling for change, he's demanding it. With new regulations compelling auto manufacturers to prioritize electric vehicles, the stakes have never been higher. But what does this mean for you, the consumer? In this video, we will learn more about this huge news in detail and reveal the truth behind this staggering statistic. So, let's get started with this. The Biden administration just dropped some new rules for cars, aiming to nudge folks towards buying greener rides. The Department of Energy is behind this move, pushing car companies to produce more vehicles that either sip less gas or run on electricity. Basically, they want more electric cars hitting the streets. Now, the auto industry is worried about this. The Department of Energy switched up something called the petroleum equivalency factor in response to their concerns. Environmentalists are saying that even with these tweaks, the final rules are still tough enough to push car fleets to cut back on petrol use. Pete Huffman, a hotshot lawyer over at the Natural Resources Defense Council, stressed how big of a deal this update is. He basically said, "Hey car makers, no more slacking off." According to him, this move by the Department of Energy is putting the brakes on car makers relying on sketchy credits to keep selling gas guzzlers. Now, they've got to step up their game and make cars that don't drain your wallet every time you hit the gas pump. This whole deal signals that the government means business when it comes to battling climate change and slashing emissions from transportation. They're laying down clearer rules and pushing for cleaner technology to green up the car industry. The auto industry is under increasing pressure to meet stricter environmental rules. As a result, makers are forced to focus on making cars that meet these new standards. This move towards cleaner forms of transportation is good for the earth and also helps consumers' wallets by lowering the cost of fuel. More focus is expected on innovation and investment in alternative propulsion technologies as the car industry gets used to these new rules. And get this, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, is gearing up to reveal its own set of tailpipe standards for cars and lighter-duty trucks, maybe even as soon as tomorrow. Word on the street is that these standards could make 2/3 of new cars electric by 2032. That's a pretty big deal, but why is it so? The EPA made adjustments to address strong opposition from both the industry and labor sectors, as well as public hesitancy towards fully embracing electric vehicle technology. Additionally, there's a genuine concern about potential legal challenges, particularly in conservative courts. The Supreme Court, now with a 6-3 conservative majority, has increasingly limited the authority of federal agencies like the EPA in recent years. It includes restrictions on the EPA's ability to combat air and water pollution, as evidenced by a significant 2022 ruling that curtailed the agency's power to regulate carbon dioxide emissions from power plants, a major contributor to global warming. Now hang tight, because it's not just cars and light trucks getting a makeover. There's talk that heavy-duty trucks will also have their turn in the spotlight in the next few weeks. It's like the administration is on a mission to zap fossil fuels from our roadways. Biden's been going full throttle on these car rules, throwing in a truckload of cash from the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act to support them. It's all part of his grand plan to tackle climate change and beef up the job market, especially in manufacturing. And with the next presidential election looming on the horizon, you bet he's been making some moves to win over those union workers in the swing states. But hold up, because it's not all smooth cruising. Former President Trump's been revving his engine, taking some shots at Biden's all-electric nonsense. He's been trying to woo those unionized auto workers over to his side, even going so far as to predict a bloodbath if he doesn't get reelected. Pretty dramatic, huh? Some people didn't take his choice of words too kindly, thinking it sounded too much like a threat. But he's also worried about a flood of cheap Chinese electric vehicles hitting the streets, so it's a mixed bag. So, the Department of Energy dropped a formula on Tuesday that decides how electric vehicles get graded under the government's corporate average fuel economy standards. Think of it as a report card for car companies. A higher score means they can still get away with selling gas-guzzling trucks and SUVs as long as they throw in a few electric vehicles to balance things out. The government hopes this will push companies to make more fuel-efficient rides overall. However, these new fuel economy rules are still a work in progress, so we'll have to wait a little bit longer for the final version. Originally, the proposal would have slashed the calculation by a whopping 72%. Car companies freaked out, saying they'd have to cough up billions in fines just to meet the corporate average fuel economy standard. And get this, they're already pouring money into building those fancy new electric models. But the final proposition isn't quite as brutal. They've dialed back the slash to 65% and plan to roll out the changes from 2027 to 2030. That means your average Joe's electric truck like Ford's F-150 Lightning won't be boasting the same impressive fuel economy numbers. We're talking a drop from the equivalent of 238 miles per gallon down to about 83. Still decent, but definitely not as eye-popping. The Alliance for Automotive Innovation, like the Big Shot Club for major car makers, said the final version of the formula is a step in the right direction, but they're playing it cool, saying they won't know the full deal until the Department of Transportation releases the corporate average fuel economy standard later this year. John Bozella, the CEO of the trade group, emphasized the importance of these regulations working in harmony, stating that they're essentially like puzzle pieces that must fit together perfectly to be effective. Also, the Department of Transportation is about to drop the final regulation standard soon. This initial proposal aims to increase the average fuel economy of new vehicles from 46.7 miles per gallon in 2026 to a whopping 57.8 mpg by 2032. Last year, the Department of Energy got into the mix, talking about revising the petroleum equivalency calculation after getting a nudge from environmental groups like the NRDC and the Sierra Club. These green warriors argued that the old standard was too darn high, making car makers go gaga over trucks and SUVs instead of focusing on fuel-sipping small cars. Car manufacturers weren't exactly doing cartwheels over this proposal either. They griped that the original plan would force them to sell way more electric vehicles or face getting slammed with big ol' fines from the Department of Transportation. General Motors even did some math and figured they could be shelling out fines as hefty as $4,300 per vehicle. The Department of Transportation kept on insisting last summer that hitting their proposed corporate average fuel economy standard is totally doable with the tech we've got right now. But then the Department of Energy decided to open up the floor for more chit-chat from car makers and other bigwigs in the fall, listening to all the whining from industry groups. The big three from Detroit, those auto giants, are sweating bullets over this. They're worried that a tougher standard would hit them hardest since they're all about trucks and SUVs. GM said they needed some time to chew over the final standard before dishing out any thoughts. And Ford and Stellantis? Well, they're still MIA, dodging emails left and right. Classic move, guys. Environmental advocates expressed satisfaction with the outcome despite the modifications made. The previous calculation hindered both the widespread adoption of electric vehicles and advancements in the fuel efficiency of gasoline-powered vehicles, stated Joshua Berman, a senior attorney for the Sierra Club. Improving the accuracy of this fuel economy calculation will benefit our communities. Republicans are slamming the new standards, saying they're basically telling folks what cars to buy. Senator Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia said, "These regulations represent yet another step toward an unrealistic transition to electric vehicles that Americans do not want and cannot afford." House Speaker Mike Johnson from Louisiana called it a misguided electric vehicle mandate, worried that it'll make the U.S. rely on China and other rivals for minerals needed for batteries. But EPA Administrator Reagan stepped in to clarify the situation. He made it clear that the government isn't forcing anyone to buy EVs or any specific tech. He said companies have plenty of ways to comply with the rule, and the EPA is keeping things legal by not locking in on one tech. Reagan also mentioned that hitting carbon pollution targets doesn't mean everyone has to be driving electric by 2032. Even if only 30% of cars sold are electric, the EPA thinks they can still hit their goals. And hey, last year electric car sales shot up by 47%, hitting a record 1.19 million units. But towards the end of the year, growth slowed down to a still respectable 34% in December. John Bozella, CEO of the Alliance, chimed in saying slowing down the rush to electricity was smart. He reckons it'll help the industry hit more realistic targets in the years ahead. Even though the new emission goals will be tough, they give the market and supply chains time to catch up to more electric rides. Toyota, the hybrid kingpin in the US, thinks giving people a choice between electric and hybrid cars is the quickest way to cut carbon. They're pumped that the new EPA rules open the door for more plug-in hybrids and regular gas-electric hybrids to meet the emission limits. So, there you have it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, drive safe and stay tuned for more updates.